Today I'm going to be reacting to my old videos that are evaluating the cards from Spiritforged before we had any kind of experience with playing those cards. Like, that probably will be some really outrageous stuff that I'm going to be saying, and hopefully some laughs. Let's see what I said about Last Rites. As we all know now, this is a card that is incredibly good in any kind of miracle deck. And to some degrees, it's also playable in Aurora, for example, right? But overall, it is a playable card. I gave it a 2-star review, which means it's niche, which I think we are all agreed that that is true. It's a niche card. It's a playable card, but it's a niche card. That's essentially 2 stars for me in those in my reviews. Maybe I should work on those, making it a little bit more understandable. But anyway, let's see what I said. Think about this card as a reverse. You can play it earlier, so you can split the cost, and it's very obvious what happen. And when the cards advantage is coming from, because you're fueling the cards into the graveyard. There are ways of that doing with battlefield unit spells. So there's a lot of ways of getting cards into the graveyard, right? And then the graveyard becomes your hand, so you're able to play those units. But unfortunately, to do that, you have to conquer or hold, which is another problem you need to solve in this puzzle to get the potential value. And the potential value isn't game breaking. So I was very close to giving this a 1-star, but I'm giving it a 2-star because this kind of like reanimator type of strategy at some point in every card game was playable. So this might be playable at some point as well. It just requires you to have a creature that will be very cheap in the graveyard and have some broken effects, so some 0 energy cards and so on. I was so close. I was so close, guys. I was so close to actually just looking through Origins card and saying, oh wait, we have Raza over here. But remember, this was before we even played with any of those cards, right? So I was so close of saying, yeah, we already have a creature like this. I was thinking about a creature that does something when played, not only might. I feel like my perception of the game back then was still a little bit diseased from other card games, where just the number doesn't really win you, right? I feel like because I went straight up from Star Wars Unlimited, which basically has the same combat system like Hearthstone, right? When the damage stays on units, the numbers are not as valuable. Your cards need to do something. So in my perception, when I was doing those videos, and it was quite some time ago, I still had like this kind of similar vibe when it comes to establishing like actual impact. And I feel like I was putting too much focus on a card effect instead of just looking at a card at a might number, and that's it. So I was very close to like understanding that we can build a deck like this already, but I do mention exactly the type of deck that the Last Rites is playable right now, which is of course Miracle Draven or Miracle Sivir or Miracle Ezreal, right? But then you still have to be strong enough to control the battlefields, right? So it's there are some hoops you have to jump through, that's for sure. But it's a fun card. But it's probably not a competitive one, at least for the next few expansions. Yeah, you're definitely wrong over here, right? I said not playable, not competitive one for the next few expansions. Well, I was wrong. It's already competitive. It's already very good. And I just didn't anticipate that a miracle deck like this is gonna be already playable. So I would still probably give the shovel 2 stars right now when I would be reviewing this set, because it is niche. You don't have 3 copies of it. Most decks play 1 copy of it. So I would probably still keep this same amount of stars, but I definitely missed the opportunity to build its presence and like possibilities of already establishing exactly the type of deck that I said, which is the Reanimator deck, right? That it could be possibly played already in this expansion. So, but okay, I am not dissatisfied with what I said about Last Rite. All right, guys, I gave Cull a 1 star. And as we know, right now, Cull is playable in one particular deck. It actually makes the deck even remotely playable chance at shining out because it's a combo piece, right? It's comboing with the red Ezreal, with the pet crew from first expansion from Origins. So we don't have a opinion about the rat itself, but let's see what I said about Cull. And I definitely would have not assumed that this works with the rat, even if I would read those 2 cards right now. I would still make the same assumption. I would say, yeah, cull doesn't untap the rat because token is not a card and it's not being played. It's +1 might. When I concur, play a gold gear token, exhausted. It's a filler, right? Now, you don't want to waste your deck slots for cards like this. Like, I don't think this is any good. Yeah, well, I mean, you made an assumption and your assumption was wrong. It does work in a specific deck and it's a 3-off in that specific deck. So, in retrospect, this should have been a 2-star, but it would require me to understand a very specific interaction that I definitely didn't put even effort into understanding, but I do think maybe I could have. So that's a lesson for the future. All right, let's see what I said about fizz.
Drop with 3 might and costs
6 stars. It's pretty high, right? That's the highest possible.
When you play me, you may play a spell from your you played, use annoying to play against, which I guess goes in hand with the lore of what actually fizz does, because it's just an annoying creature. Anyway, you have so many options here. Replaying stack deck for sure, replaying the new Coldshot for 0 and just drawing cards for sure. You can do all of that stuff. You will play with purple red, replaying a projectile that you use on battlefield turn before. Go for it. There's so many options here, like it's incredible.
For now, and nothing really like
entered the play effect
mind breaking,
play me, right? Which also combos with the new Ezreal signature spell. And thank God the signature spell from Ezreal has a banish on its effect, because otherwise you would have an infinite loop here as well. So fizz is incredible. It's a toolbox, and cards like this are always incredibly valuable, and this guy is probably gonna be the most expensive rare of the entire set. So
most expensive rare on the entire set. Let's think about that. Was there a bit more expensive set rare in the set? Actually, no. He was the most expensive. So that's kind of funny. He was the most expensive, and then Switcheroo. Actually, no. Guardian Angel was more expensive and is now more expensive. Yeah. Guardian Angel, you guys are right. But at the beginning, fizz was more expensive. When it was like the first day, fizz was more expensive for sure. But then Guardian Angel established itself in a better spot. Yeah, you guys are right.
So if you are, if you want to play purple, you probably have to get 3 of those. It's just incredible. The value, the flexibility of this card is unparalleled. And then you have other combos with it that we're going to talk about.
Who's this guy? Have you seen his face? He's pretty smart though.
To play the cards that have repeat cost, and then additionally play the repeat cost, even though cumulatively the card would be more expensive than 4, because fizz should be looking at the base cost.
Okay, I'm right about this.
Remember that he can target himself when he's playing a card. So for example, you can play fizz and then ride the wind, and ride the wind the fizz itself. So he enters and goes directly to a location, untaps, scores probably, and goes back to the base.
I'll be honest with you, I completely forgot I said that. That's a good example, no? That is a really good example. Like fizz with Ride the Wind is actually a really good example that is actually pretty playable, but we don't see it often because the decks that play fizz don't really have typically nowadays Ride the Wind. But that is still something that could be done in the future. Good idea, Lothar.
There's so many things you can do with this card. It's incredibly powerful. It rarely...
Okay. And this one, by the way, remember, this is all done before we had any games with any of those cards, right? This is like when the China had the previews. So I'm giving my opinion here without playing the card, and I was a very big fan of Vex. And before I hear my own opinion over here, I feel like probably should have swapped Sivir and Vex when it comes to reviews. Sivir should have been like a 5-star, and Vex should have been like a 6-star. Let's see.
Next one is Vex Cheerless. Jesus Christ. Okay, she's not working at IKEA. She's not cheerless. She is cheerless. 5-drop, 5 might, has a power cost. While I'm in combat, friendly spells cost 1 energy and 1 power cost, lasts to a minimum of 1, and enemy spells cost 1 energy and 1 power more. TLDR, if she's in combat, your opponent doesn't play spells.
That is true.
The most insane part about this, and I think that alone deserves a 5-star. Think about it this way as well. In orange, there's a unit for 6 that has 5 might, cannot be targeted by spell. This character essentially makes a very similar effect whenever you're in combat which essentially neuters all the action spells that your opponent would like to use in combat on the showdowns, and Vex kind of shuts all of that down.
Like Rebuke for free energy and free power cost is almost unplayable, right?
But also remember that this has an upside for you as,
and you will have, so your opponent will have a Rebuke for free energy and free power, while you are gonna have a Rebuke for 1 energy and 1 power. Like the difference is just staggering.
well. So you're gonna be able to play the incredibly expensive spells way cheaper. Coldshot to draw cards suddenly doesn't cost you power. You're gonna pay for the repeat cost, of course, but that's it. Like it buffs you. It allows you to suddenly boost up your tempo during the combats. So it promotes proactive fights, but also promotes you to sequence that in a different way during combat when more stuff will happen and your opponent cannot play around it because suddenly multiple of your spells can be used cheaper. In an Ezreal deck, right? Think about it this way. I don't know why would you play Premonition in an Ezreal deck, but let's say we're playing Premonition in an Ezreal deck. Suddenly we go to combat, and you can...
Right, the Premonition example is not really selling it.
Play Premonition for 1 energy and 2 power, draw 3 cards. In those 3 cards, you probably have more spells. Suddenly you can play them for just 1 energy and not play power, even though they would require you typically to. Like, Ride the Wind becomes a 1 cost that during combat, right?
Yeah, Vex Ride the Wind is one of the most powerful things you can do. Like, it's absolutely insane.
Combat, it becomes a 1 cost. If something goes wrong or you want to suddenly like go into the other location, let's say Vex is holding a location, holding a battlefield, someone attacks into her, right? And then you go, okay, then now we'll just go to the other battlefield for 1 resource and I will conquer there when you're not ready to fight me in the other battle.
And someone would have to, like, for example, use Defy on that Ride the Wind. That would cost you 2 energy and 2 power. So suddenly, like, this Vex just bought so much tempo, right?
That is incredibly powerful, and it's gonna be maybe hard to squeeze it in like, for example, in any deck right now. But I think...
Yeah, I'm thinking like a little bit too fixated on the current archetypes, and I'm not focusing on finding new archetypes when this character could be playable. That is something that I have to think about when I'm gonna be doing reviews for set 3. Like, I have to think a little bit about more... I can't remember if I've seen all the legends at that point, but I probably did. So maybe I should be taking into account which decks should I be also focusing more in the future.
She's a 5-star, very close to potentially being 6-star, because it all depends on the other spells that we're gonna get in the future, but she is incredibly good. This is...
Yeah, okay, so actually I'm pretty happy with my estimation of Vex. I did not give enough examples of which decks would I use it in, but I personally tested Vex after when you know, after the release. I tested it myself the most into a mid-range Annie, where the biggest unit was actually Vex, and I was winning with it quite steadily, and the tricks went insane. But the problem is I was too fixated on just Vex, and the deck should probably have other avenues. But essentially, once Vex goes into combat, she's so hard to remove, because I had like a full hand and possibilities of just throwing like 2 spells every time, right? But when you untap with Annie for 2 at the end of the turn, you essentially can play 2 spells, right? So that's insane. That's just like absolutely bonkers. You just have to find a potential way of getting more cards to squeeze in those cards that are gonna be puking out with the Vex. But overall, I'm pretty happy with my estimation over here. I think it's pretty spot on. Well, I gave Overzealous Fan a 5 stars. Let's see what I said.
Fan is a 2-drop with 2 might that I'm rating at 5 stars. When I defend, you may kill me to move an attacking unit to its base. It has a built-in fight or flight that doesn't have
so
to
far
be
good.
triggered. It's an open secret, essentially, like an open hidden card in the form of 2 might unit. That's the way you have to think about it. But it's also a vanilla unit that you can play on turn 1, and then by moving it around, getting additional value. In general, I feel like this card just slots into Annie instead of Poros, because it allows you to have control of battlefields and force your opponent to make really inefficient moves towards your battlefield, because Overzealous Fan can always be sacrificed during the defend window, right? Which is before any spells are being cast during combat.
So I remember that I had no idea that Draven worked with this, right? That was before anyone actually had an idea that Draven will be drawing cards when Overzealous Fan will be like fight or flighting, right? So no one had this perception that this card is actually gonna be so broken in Draven, same as Fight or Flight. And I'm talking here about Annie, and I disagree with what I said about Annie, because I said that this is gonna replace like Poros. I think Poros are great, and there are probably other choices to cut, right? But in general, like, yeah.
Which also probably will
Hard
affect
to
the
predict
decision making of your opponent. So they will have to play with more units going to the board where there's Overzealous fan. What if there's a flash after that and then suddenly doesn't really matter as well? Like, there's a lot of possibilities of how to play with this card, and because of that, alongside the fact that it's a basic 2-drop, makes it incredibly playable. Talking about 2-drop.
Oh, okay. Well, let's go into Treasure Hunter as well.
Hunter is a 5-star for me. 2-drop with 1 might. When I move, play a gold gear token, exhausted. Now, you can compare it to Sentry in blue, which also has the same stats, but the effect is that
I changed the camera size. No.
To some degree, Treasure Hunter kind of draws a card, but not exactly. It's very hard to compare them directly because it's more like tempo advantage for the Treasure Hunter, because you don't lose your resource row that much, right? But the Treasure Hunter can be used multiple times. So, for example, when you play Annie, if you play Treasure Hunter in Annie, right? So because the other 2-drop here would also like to be played in Annie, right? So let's assume we play first. We play Treasure Hunter. We then move to our second turn. We have 4 resources. We move with Treasure Hunter to one of the locations. We get a point. We get a gold gear token. Then we play Deckhand. On the other location, we get the second point. We pass. We untap with 3 resources. And now opponent attacks into us. We just flash to the base. We move our Treasure Hunter back as well, and now suddenly we just created 2 gold gear token, exhausted of course, but they do have value.
I mean, it's a good example. I don't think I ever seen it in a game because Annie was not that popular, but it is a good example that I'm giving here. Like, you would create 2 gold tokens for essentially your third turn.
The Kaisers that we're gonna use, the Void Seekers, the Dariuses that we're gonna use are not that costly in tempo. Or maybe even because of this, we might actually play the Annie leader unit earlier than typical to draw back a spell, to buy back a spell from the graveyard. Treasure Hunter itself changes the way that you would play out your typical game, because you can plan out your turns accordingly, differently accordingly to the creation of the gold gear tokens. And remember, this creature would still be in your base, so it then creates a 3rd gear gold gear token the next following turn if it moves. Doesn't matter if it dies or something. It created the gold gear tokens already. It's an incredible card, and it definitely benefits from decks that will have the easy ability to move it. But even if it just creates 1 gold gear token, I think it's still enough to guarantee to make this star review actually valid. So
yeah, I think I'm okay here. Like, I think giving it 5 stars is viable. I don't think it's a 6-star card in my own book. So I think like I'm happy with what I said here.
Now we have
all right, so I gave a 6-star review to Sivir, which is the highest possible. Same like with Fizz. Let's see what I said, because that's, I mean, you know, if you play Sivir, you play this Sivir, but you don't see her being played more. So let's see.
Sivir, for me, is a 6-star. She's a 4-cost with 1 power and 4 might. Now, after hearing my opinion, I would love to hear your opinion. How many stars would you give to Sivir yourself?
So probably because this is controversial.
She's a 6-star because she has built-in accelerate that allows her to decks to actually matter. So she enables herself, because if you spend
that is true.
2 power this turn, spend, not get. You have to spend the power cost, right? I have +2 might and have ganking, so she can for 5 energy and 2 power cost become a 6-drop, and she will enter red. So she's gonna be like a mini Darius, but doesn't require you to have 2 cards, which is a big deal. So now you have a card that is essentially a mini Darius a turn earlier in purple, and she can have this effect during an opponent turn as well if you spend the power cost, and she can go between battlefields. That sounds kind of incredible. And if you play Sivir yourself, then she recuperates.
Dude, I am kind of convincing myself over here. Like, actually all good points, but it's just like you don't have many occasions to actually play against the Sivir, so you just... I don't think I ever played against the Sivir Mercenary, apart from the very rare occasions when I play against Sivir Miracle, and that maybe happened twice.
It's the cost by creating gold tokens. So that is incredible. No, that has to be incredible. Like, for me, this is a 6-star, but I'm really curious about your opinion. So let me know in the comments, how many stars would you give to Sivir herself? And also, that's a very nice art. Right, next.
Dude, I'm serious though. When it comes to Sivir, I feel like she might actually be still like 6 is too much. But I probably should have gave her like 5. And I still think what I said here in this video actually makes a lot of sense. So even though she is not currently found in the metagame, those are all valid points that I said. Like, she is a 5 energy drop that has 6 attack and also can buff herself during an opponent's turn. So she has like a lot of possible scenarios when this could be actually very useful. She is power hungry, but that's just the Sivir decks, right? So yeah, it's actually not that bad. All right, so I gave Draven Audacious a 2-star, which is niche, by the way. When I give a 2-star, it's niche. Now, I can't remember what I said, but let's think about this. In the established Spiritforged metagame, Draven Audacious only plays in Irelia, right? And maybe in a Yasuo, but it's basically almost the same deck, right? So let's see what I said.
A hot take. The Draven 6-drop with 1 power cost and 6 smite, deflect built in. The first time I win a combat each turn, you score 1 point. And when I die in combat, choose an opponent, they score 1 point. I'm giving him 2 stars, which is
By the way, he should not be in purple. I think this should be like red. No?
Probably controversial because I see a lot of people actually excited about this card. Now, I do think that he's probably playable maybe only in Yasuo, right? But
okay. I'm onto something here. Because as I said, I don't think I focus enough on new legends. So I probably did not talk about Irelia, but I'm mentioning Yasuo. So okay.
Overall, he has a very big downside. Now, thematically, I think it fits. He is high risk, high reward. In this case, I think it's very, 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 very high risk and a high reward because you have to do it during combat. If you lose this guy before he wins any combats because of some combat tricks, he gets smoke screened or something, like he suddenly becomes such a penalty for you that you might just lose on the spot.
I wonder if I mentioned
you might lose on the spot.
That no, I did not mention about not winning at 7.
Okay. And when you play him,
that rule, well, like if you, for example, are like at 6 points, you attack into a battlefield, you win the combat, and you go to 7, you don't win because your combat gives you point first, and then you conquer, which gives you a conquer at 7. I probably never mentioned this because if I'm not mistaken, that rule, that fact was established later on.
You probably don't want to leave him in a base at a 6, you know, because if you open yourself, for example, to any kind of removal like Singularity or Falling Star, then you lose a lot of tempo. But if you want to play him alongside any other cards that will require him to, like, you know, benefit by being ready or like going into a location, you essentially have to have 8. So like Ride the Wind or Yasuo's ability, and then you can be proactive with him to turn when you play him when he's a surprise factor. Now, when he's being played like that, probably very good. Problem is, it's very telegraphed as well with how you will set up yourself, and like you can play around it by not being in locations, for example, on when the Yasuo goes to 8, right? There's a lot of like not nuisance, but like
nuance, bro.
That was the word. Nuance to it. So I think right now I'm giving him 2 stars because he's not only niche but also very, very, very high risk, and I feel like people will turn around him and will say, yeah, he's probably not worth playing because he loses more than he wins. But we'll see. I'm happy to be proven wrong here. This guy, 6 stars.
Okay, so when it comes to the Draven, I feel like I'm actually okay on this opinion. I'm giving him 2 stars because I feel like he's gonna be niche. I gave the example of the Yasuo before giving the example of the Irelia, which I think is overall gonna be a theme of those videos. That's something I need to fix for the 3rd set. I need to think about more about context of the future legends. But overall, I feel like this is pretty good. Like, not even every single Irelia plays him. Some Irelias don't even play the Draven Audacious or play it in the sideboard. So having it as a 2-star, I think it's fine. I think the last sentence that I said about him maybe not even being played completely, that was a little bit too much. But overall, I'm not unhappy what I said about this. But the next one is Ezreal. Let's see what I said about Ezreal.
This guy, 6 stars. Fuck me. Ezreal put 3 cost, 1 power cost, 3 might. When you play me, discard 1, then draw 2. We could stop reading here, and he would have 6.
Yeah, I agree.
Would allow him to be incredibly, incredibly good. Just discarding 1, drawing 2, leaving a body on the ground. That is a fantastic. Then he has still a line of tech. Optional additional cost you pay. Cost 1 less energy or 1 power power energy less. This not only works also on repeat, but also on accelerate. So suddenly your accelerates will either be, let's say you play purple red, so your Darius suddenly only costs 5 or costs 4 in power, depending on how you want to, you know, benefit from. If you play Kai'Sa, suddenly she is 4 cost and power, or 5 cost, no power, and she has the accelerate. All the repeat spells. Not many actual meta choices when it comes to that being like an actual scenario, right? When we don't typically have decks who have Ezreal and like Darius or Kai'Sa together. For now, maybe. That's gonna be something that is gonna be happening more in the future, depending on the decks. Piercing Light becomes incredible because now it costs 4 energy, 1 power, and you deal 2 times 4. Like in general, every single card becomes incredible. And remember that this stacks as well, right? So if you have 2 Ezreals, then suddenly you can choose both, for example, right? Or even maybe 2 energy less. That's okay. We have to get a clarification of that. But yeah, you could definitely choose one and the other if you have 2 Ezreals. So that's correct. A thing as well, right? And remember that correct. You can choose both. You can choose one time, twice. You don't have to play him in Ezreal. We can play him, for example, in Sivir. So when you play... So, to be honest, I completely... In those reaction videos to the pre-release of the cards, the previews, I did not assume we're gonna have a reanimator deck already. I was making an assumption, we're gonna probably hear it in the future when I'm gonna be like reviewing the, like for example, a battering ram. We're gonna hear that then. That I'm not predicting yet that card to be playable because in my mind, we should not be getting a deck like the Miracle deck yet. I made a boo-boo here because obviously we got it, but I thought we're not gonna be getting it yet. I didn't think we're gonna be that fast into the game to actually have a that kind of deck already. Yeah. Sivir, and you go second, you can insta drop him, you get to filter your hand, sculpt your hand, you get a card into the graveyard, which is also an upside in a lot of cases, right? You get the recuperate, yeah, like with Scrap Heap and like Raza, right? Cost of Sivir getting you a gold token, right? And then in the upcoming turn, you can play Fizz, for which you pay with the gold gear token that generates another guild gear token, and then you can replay a card from your graveyard that you got from Ezreal. Insane. Like this. Now another bad news, but I think this is gonna be the most expensive card of the entire set. Yeah, spot on. But to be fair, not really a hard prediction to do. Like you take a look at the epics and you're like, yeah, this one is fucking nuts, you know? So I don't think this is something that was hard to predict. But I did say that I was predicting Ezreal to be worth like between $100 to $120. But to be fair, that was also before we knew that Chinese cards will be playable. And I think he would have this price. I think he would be like $120 if we wouldn't have Chinese cards available. It's gonna be more expensive most likely than Time Warp because the set is gonna be released ahead of regionals in Bologna. And if purple is gonna be played as much as I think it will be, this card is gonna be the most looked card at. So yeah, prepare yourself. This guy is... And now we get cold. Okay, well, I guess was pretty good establishing and a good opinion that I established there about Ezreal. Let's see what I said about Coldshot. So we don't have to like spend a lot of time talking about Ezreal. Which is a 0 spell with 1 power. It's an action and has a repeat for 1. Well, to be fair, I gave it 6 stars, so I think it was okay. Power. Look at the top 2 cards of your main deck, draw 1 and recycle the other. So for 0 mana, 2 power, you get to draw 2 cards, but you also filter more cards. It's I don't know, like in an Ezreal deck, you're probably not gonna play it because he draws cards by himself, so maybe you don't need it. But okay, so this was a wild statement, but it's I can understand where I was coming with this. Like in a deck that should be drawing a lot of cards by himself, right? Maybe you will not need it. But again, I didn't predict that we were gonna be already having a miracle deck, and that's why I said this, I think. In other purple deck, this is kind of cracked. When you combine it with, of course, Ezreal, now suddenly you get to play this effect for just 1 power, which is bonker, right? Then Fizz might replay this from the graveyard. Like, you will get so much card advantage. The only thing you care about is just not losing your resource row. So, I'm onto something here. If I would probably think a little bit harder, maybe I would establish myself to like think about building a miracle deck very early in the metagame. But but hey, You have to think about that. But this card, its potential is incredible.
I
It's
was on the track
6
there.
stars. There's no way of looking at this card and not thinking this is not a phenomenal card on a verge of being broken. So
Yeah, I agree 100%.
also the possibility of, you know, using it once or twice gives you flexibility, even if you don't want to like fully like invest into playing that with the repeat, right? So you have having, and also important, this is an action card, right? If this would be only played during your main phase when you're not in combat, it would be much worse. But because it's an action card that you can use during the fights, you can be very surprised what is happening. Like maybe you will.
I wonder if I'll give an example of playing Nocturnes. That's something that I was doing later on. Like I liked doing cold shots mid combat to bring in a Nocturne from the top of the deck to my battlefield while fighting. You can do the same with stack deck, by the way. Let's see if I mentioned it.
React to a spell that is specifically being played by an opponent, right? I mean, not react, but like play after it, because you need something directly from your deck to answer that situation. So it's phenomenal card. Now we have...
Okay, so I didn't mention the Nocturnes, but I feel like overall the way I described Coldshot is very good. And no notes, I guess. It is a broken card. It is without doubt a broken card. It should not be costed like this. Even without the repeat, it would be insane, but with the repeat, it's absolutely broken, right? So, yeah, interesting.
It's just rather destroy it. So, yeah, 1 star. Next one is the purple counter spell called Hardbergen. Anyway, 2 cost, reaction.
Okay, we're gonna rewind what I'm reading the text.
Makes it very awkward to now play against purple. And because of that, it gets 6 stars. If you play any, your opponent will always have to think every round, well, you just untapped 2 resources. Do you have hard bargain? Can I play any spell or do I get absolutely fucked? Right? This is like incredibly powerful just because of its potential presence. And if it's like open deck list, having 1 hard bargain in your deck makes your opponent always question open mana, which is...
Yeah, that's literally what's happening, by the way. In the regional opens, you will see a lot of purple decks have 1 hard bargain. So once you reach like top 8, your opponents will always have to think about it when you have to open. And because we established also that purple decks have like all the spells for 2, essentially you make it incredibly hard for your opponents to read your hand whenever you have to open. So far, no notes.
Another advantage when it comes to like competitive environment. So overall, this is an incredibly powerful spell, but at the same time, it's not all powerful and it's not like mind bending and game breaking, but it puts enough pressure to actually matter in a meta defining way. So yeah, for me, this is kind of nuts. Thank God it's an uncommon. Oh, this is gonna be funny. So Switcheroo.
All right, Switcheroo next. 4 stars. I do believe this should be higher, but let's see what I said.
2 cost, 2
power. I think I would give it now a 5
so
stars.
Ignore the cost and just pay it for 1 power. Action, of course, if hidden, then it becomes reaction. Swap the mites of 2 units at the same battlefield this turn. Now, this instantly feels like, oh, it's a Teemo card, which is true. But at the same time, I feel like if you play...
I mean, it is a Teemo card. It works perfectly in a Teemo deck where you have like small creatures like the Teemo, right?
Play it as a hidden card, then it's kind of obvious that it's gonna be Switcheroo, and then you have to play around that stuff, right? But I think where Switcheroo is most powerful, because the effect is incredibly powerful, is when this card is being played from hand.
Yeah, I 100% agree with this still. I think it's Switcheroo is the most powerful when you use it from hand and your opponent cannot read that you have it, right? Because if there's like a hidden card, your opponent has to assume that it might be Switcheroo. But when you play it from hand, your opponent most likely will not be able to read it. And also remember, with Vex, Switcheroo is 1 energy, 1 power.
It's an action when your opponent doesn't expect the hidden, because the actual surprise is the card hidden in your hand. Ah, see what I did there?
Yeah, I see what you did there. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. I agree.
You actually hide the information twice. So, and then suddenly the cost makes sense because it's incredibly powerful card, which could potentially win almost every single showdown for you, right? So, I think this is a very good card. So, I'm giving it 4 stars. It's not gonna be super meta defining, I think.
Okay, bro, calm down. It is meta defining. It is meta defining, and I would give it definitely 5 star now. If I after having experience playing in this meta game, I think I would give it minimum 5 stars, maybe even 6
in any way, shape, or form. But it might be a powerful 1 off in a deck,
and most decks play 2 offs of Switcheroo, right? If you play Switcheroo, it's most likely a 2-off.
Also remember, this again comes into play. If you have an Ezreal, this might cost 1 energy and 2 power, or 2 energy and 1 power. So you can bluff this.
Why would I say, did I think about Vex? It doesn't sound like I thought about Vex. I think I made a mistake here. I mean, I don't think, I am certain that I made a mistake here because I said Ezreal, but Ezreal doesn't cover this because there's not an additional cost.
Very easily because of the fact that it is a more expensive spell. So if you have one resource open in a showdown, but you have an Ezreal, someone has to think about it. This can be a switcheroo from hand for 1 energy, right? The potential there is...
Maybe I was thinking about Vex and not Ezreal, because with Vex, I literally mentioned that before, right? But
really big.
I don't know.
And I feel like this is a really nice card to play from hand and not from hidden. But also remember, you can... Wait, actually, can you? Can you play this from the graveyard and hide it? I actually don't know. I have to
No,
check,
you can't.
But we'll see. Probably, but yeah. Down.
No, okay, so you can't do that. What I was thinking about here, like I was giving an example of playing a fizz and then hiding the card from your graveyard. You can't, because you can only play a card and hiding a card is not playing. So you cannot do that. So I was a little bit on drugs over here in this moment, you know, ignore this guy. He's probably high on cocaine or something. This is not really good. But like first, okay, so this is like the first time when I review this and I disagree, right? To some degree, at least. It should be a 5 or a 6 star. It's way more powerful than I thought it would be, even though I think it's already powerful. The example of the Ezreal is completely like, what the fuck? That I should be probably talking here about Vex. Maybe I thought about Vex, but I said Ezreal, because with Vex, it literally becomes 1 energy, 1 power. But then the question with, can I play Fizz and play Switcheroo from graveyard? You can do that. But the problem is that to do that, you would have to play Fizz in your main phase, and then you would not have 2 units on the battlefield because that would be a showdown. So the only way of actually playing a Fizz during combat to then replay a Switcheroo from your graveyard would be, for example, using an arcane shift. So you have a Fizz anywhere, you go into showdown, then you do arcane shift on your Fizz, Fizz goes back, and now play Switcheroo mid-combat from your graveyard on 2 units that are on the battle. That is like a possibility of that happening, but you cannot do that otherwise if you just play Fizz from your hand.
Hide it? I actually don't know.
All right, well, let's prep ourselves for some hot take, because Boots of Swiftness with 2 stars. Let's see what I said. Because the review, the stars, I would probably give it now a 4. I think so. It's still like 2 stars in my book here is like a niche card. It doesn't mean that it's not good enough, but let's see how I voice my opinion.
Swiftness costs 3 energy, equipping it costs 1 power, give +2 might, and ganking. There are some combos here, like for example, the Lucian unit that will have Weapon Master can equip this for free and then gets ganking, right? So he can conquer, untap, gank the other battlefield, and still have 5 might and so on. So there are some potential here, but it's gonna be very niche. It's very expensive as well, so I don't think it's gonna be that often used. So yeah, I don't know, man. Like, many people were excited about this card in the beginning, but then when I started thinking about it more, it's very hard to squeeze this in. And if you play a deck that wants to play gear, that gear probably has to be like 1-off. So you don't want to play more gear than just Boots of Swiftness, because then you're gonna get exposed by a bit like gear hate, and that's a problem. So you want to have minimal amount of gear, all so much gear that you reach a critical point and you don't really like get hit by hate so much, right? So yeah, I'm not excited about this one, as I was thinking after reading it first and thinking about it. Cool.
All right, so yeah, I didn't put enough effort into thinking about this card, I think. I did not put the effort into thinking about future potential builds, like Irelia, for example, right? I didn't think about Red Ezreal, but to be fair, even if I would put a lot of effort into thinking about that, I would assume, because that's what I did, I just assumed with the Red Ezreal that it would never like work with something like Cull, right? So because token is not a card, what would it be played? So I would assume that that just doesn't work, that the Cull is just not working on at rat. So I feel like I didn't put enough effort over here on Boots of Swiftness. If I would have to make another judgment of this card, I would still probably say it's niche. So I would probably leave it maybe at 2 star, but then I would voice my opinion in a way where I would say that this card is very powerful in used in a right combination, just kind of like the Draven. It's a 2 star, it's a niche card, but not the best, right? It's like not something that you will see in a lot of decks. It's gonna be in a very specific decks. So yeah. All right, let's see what I said about Edge of Night. Edge of Night is less played now in the metagame than it was in the past. It was also beloved by the Chinese metagame more than the European or North American one.
Edge of Night for me is a 6-star, but maybe it should be a little bit less. It costs 3 energy. It has hidden. When you play this from face down, attach it to a unit you control here. Normal equip costs you 1 power. It just gives +2. So it's like a buff spell, right? But it's an equip. So it stays on the board if the creature is dying. And then you are able to equip it for the 1 power cost. Decks like Teemo can play this just by paying 1 resource. But otherwise, think about this card as a 0 energy cost, but 1 power cost equipment that stays on the board. And when you think about that and you look at the card and instead of 3, you see a 0 power, you kind of start understanding that this might be actually very good.
Yeah, okay, I agree with this. No, I still think so. The problem is that the purple decks typically have so many good cards that you cannot really squeeze this in.
Right, so for me, this is a 6 stars card because of the potential value over time. And it's also tempo value because you can play this very, very fast. For example, you play Deckhand. You go to an open battlefield, immediately drop the Edge of Night in that location. Suddenly,
I am way too focusing on potential Annie decks. Okay, so that's a lesson for the third set. It seems like I'm really focused on talking about the current best archetype and how it affects the current best archetype. I need to put more effort into thinking about if we already have the legends shown though, right? If I know the legends, the new legends, I should think about more about those legends. At the same time, I should also think about the current legends. Okay, we learn.
Deckhand is a fort, right? Because it gets +2 might. And even if it dies, that's okay. You still get to keep the Edge of Night, so you can then equip it to another unit and essentially gain tempo that you lose by using the resources. But you gain card advantage because this will allow you to win more fights. So
I mean, to be fair, wouldn't a Draven, a mid-range, or like not a mid-range, but like a faster Draven playing deckhands with Edge of Nights make a lot of sense? I think so, no? Like, you play deckhand onto a battlefield, it has 2 power. Then, as I said, you hide the Edge of Night. Your opponent would like to attack into that scout, expecting a fight or flight or something. But instead, you go Edge of Night, and you probably win the combat, draw a card, and you still have your... And even if you lose and you don't draw a card, you still have your equipment. I think that's maybe there's a way of building a aggressive Draven that is more about that kind of play than the current mid-range version. I don't know. Maybe it's something that we could explore.
In my eyes, this is a 6 stars. Like, you have to play around it. It gives a lot of value. And again, if you play gear in a purple deck, like you're probably gonna play a limited amount. So like, for example, in an Irelia deck, I would consider playing this alongside Sterak's in some combination. 1 star.
Sterak's? All right, I gave Sterak's a fucking 6-star review. Oh my god. Yeah, okay.
Sterak for Edge of Night, 2 Edge of Night, 1 Sterak, or 2 Sterak, like any of those. It can be like 3 to 5 slots essentially between those 2 pieces of equipment because they are so impactful during combats and change the map, but also stay on the board and get you value. Spirit Wheel.
All right, so I think my Edge of Night review, what I said was okay. I think the examples that I brought up are also decent apart from the Sterak's note. I would not give it a 6-star now. I would give it a 5-star. I think it's still a very powerful card that probably is underutilized. If there's any point in the game where some of the purple cards are getting banned, then we're probably gonna see Edge of Night get more playtime. All right, let's see what I said about Bushwhack. I gave it 1 star. And I'll be honest with you, right now I would give it 2 star as a niche card, right? It's only right now in the metagame playable in the Miracle decks. But let's see what I said.
Now, Bushwhack is 2 mana, 1 power, can be hit. Friendly units enter ready this turn. Play a gear token exhausted. Now, I'll be honest with you. I a little bit struggle with understanding what exactly you want to do with the Bushwhack. Like, you want to play this as a hidden, but if you want to use it in an opponent's turn, then it doesn't like really change what your unit is going to be doing.
Which is, by the way, true.
If they're tapped or not when someone is attacking you. This would make sense, for example, if you play a Rengar that I'm going to be discussing later, because you are playing a unit during your attack and that unit then will enter ready so it can exit the battlefield if they win. So there's some synergy there, but it's giga expensive. So I'm risking it here. Maybe I'm missing some obvious synergy that you can point out in the comment. But for me, this is a trash card, and I would love to hear from you guys if Bushwhack is for some reason very good and I'm just missed.
All right, so I'll be honest with you. I would I would probably right now still give it I would record the same reaction if I would not see it in action, right? I think it's very hard to understand where the value of Bushwhack comes in. And if I remember correctly, watching other content creators react to Bushwhack was very similar to my opinion. They were all saying that this is a trash card, unplayable, and so on, right? And to be fair, I think it is right now. It is. It's only playable in one archetype, and that is in the Miracle deck of the Miracle purple version of the decks, where you just play multiple creatures in one turn and just try to alpha strike. So I feel like probably not far off, but I should definitely think about the potential of a deck that plays a lot of creatures for cheap, right? And then this card becomes much better. But it is very confusing that they added the potential of this card being hidden. The only reason when I play Bushwhack as a hidden card is to bluff that I have a fight or flight there, for example, or a switcheroo, right? So I'm just hiding Bushwhack to just put an additional question mark for my opponent, and it's literally just a bluff, right? And then because I already have a plan to use Bushwhack in the future turn, like in the one turn or two, right, where I will use it from my hidden to make the actual effect matter. And you can also think about it this way: if you put it to hidden, then you don't pay the energy cost, right? So that's an upside as well. So in theory, you can play it as hidden, but it's mostly for the bluff effect than anything else. So I don't think I'm far off. On the Bushwhack, it's very hard to understand why this card is hidden, and that was very confusing when it comes to like making a meaningful opinion about this card. But again, it is a playable card, and it does help an entire archetype to actually exist in the game. And it's one of the best decks in the entire game, right? And the first person to use Bushwhack was the what was his name? Luca. My God, he has a very interesting nickname. Fuck, I can't remember. Anyway, Luca, who won the proxy tournament in Bologna, was the first person to ever use Bushwhack in a competitive deck. And when I saw it, I was like, damn, this is incredibly smart. You know, so it is, you are required to like look very deep into the game mechanics and understand the purpose to actually make a decision to put this card into a deck with a very specific purpose. So kudos to Luca there. All right, so the next card is gonna be Battering Ram that I gave 2 stars for. So let's see what I said about Battering Ram, and as we now know, it completely enabled in the Miracle version of the decks. Ram, for 5 resources, 5 might, I cost 1 less for each card you've played this turn to a minimum of 1. Now, let's get it out of the way. This counts only played cards. Playing a token doesn't count, okay? Playing a hidden card, as in hiding it, doesn't count as a card. Your runes are also not playing a card because they don't count as cards. So there's gonna be a lot of, like, I would say this, when people are not really accustomed to card games, they're gonna misread this card very heavily. At the same time, I don't think it's a great card. Like, this would be beneficial a lot if you play 0 mana cards, like for example, seals, but... Okay, we're getting there. We mentioned seals with Battering Ram. It's the first step. At the same time, you're deramping yourself, so you have to float mana, and it's just like... Yeah, we're all doing that. We're floating the mana in Miracle decks. That's what we're doing. Okay, when would I like to play this card? 3 resources for 5 might? Yeah, that's playable, but not great. That sounds good. I have to play 2 other cards. So maybe this works with, like, for example, Stupefies. I play 2 Stupefies in 1 turn, and then I can play Battering Ram on top of that. But yeah, so I definitely can identify the problem with how I perceive the power level of cards. I'm looking through a prismat of current decks. So when I'm talking here about Stupefy, I can guarantee you I'm talking about Stupefy because I'm thinking about this card, how it would be played in a Kai'Sa deck, for example. And that's just not correct. So that's something that I need to fix for the future evaluation of cards to make it more accurate. But otherwise, I'm just sitting there with a 5-drop that just doesn't do anything. So I would... And this is also the thing that I mentioned before. If I'm gonna... like right now, with the knowledge and the experience I have in Riftbound after playing like an entire set and a half, essentially, I understand that it's actually, in comparison to other card games, units in this game have more meaning even if they don't have a text. The might on the unit is actually incredibly important because they heal automatically after the showdowns or at the end of the round, so you get much more value from a bigger creature than you would get, for example, in a game like Hearthstone or Star Wars Unlimited.
But I have a 5-drop that has a potential to do so. Why would not like to play just a Draven, for example, that just possibly gets to like 7 might, right? Or more.
7,
so
what the fuck?
Battering Ram is just not a great
Probably wanted to say Darius.
card. Maybe in the future when there will be some more synergy with like drawing a lot of cards and like playing a lot of cheap cards, maybe then it gets its moment to shine. But right now it's a niche card that I probably will not see a lot.
Dude, I was so close. I was so close of actually saying, yeah, we just need a deck that draws a lot of cards and plays a lot of cheap cards. I already mentioned seals and so on. Like, I was so close, man, to actually just understanding that we can build a deck already like that. But it's kind of funny to like see how was I evaluating this kind of card, because it is only playable in one archetype, and that is Miracle Draven. So I would say that giving it 2 stars is still valid. But the same what I did with last rites, I did with Battering Ram. I do think that the card is gonna be more played in the future, but not yet, because I did not predict that a deck like Miracle Purple decks can exist already, right? That was the thing that I didn't already predict, that it's gonna be a thing in expansion 2 and not like 3, 4, 5, for example. All right, let's see what I said about Assembly Rig, because I gave it 1 star. But I'll be honest with you, right now, I would give it 2 star and establish that it's a very good card against any like kind of control-ish mirror matches and so on. Like, if you play a Kaisa, you probably should have at least 1 Assembly Rig, maybe in your main or in your sideboard at least, because it makes such a difference whenever you play a mirror or you play against that slower deck that has a lot of removal.
Then after you play it, you have to pay 1 more resource, 1 power, recycle a unit from your trash, a unit, not any card, a unit, and then place a 3 power mech token to your base. First question I would like to ask you when you evaluate cards like this is like how many times you have to use it, and what is the overall cost to then get on rate. And even if you use it twice, you pay 6 resources and 2 power to get 6 might. That doesn't sound great. Then you have
It doesn't sound great, right? But it's like additional copy of a Ferrus forerunner, essentially, right? And it can be played earlier in the game, and then you can squeeze it into rounds, because you play it early for 4 energy, and now you split the cost. You don't have to use it in the same turn. But from now on, every turn when you have an odd mana, odd resource, you're gonna be able to pay 1 and red to have an additional unit if you had a unit in your graveyard. And it also doesn't allow you to lose in an exhaustion battle, because you recycle the units back to your deck.
Resources, 3 power to get 9 might. That also doesn't sound great. So if using it 3 times doesn't sound great, then it's not a good card.
Yeah, I disagree. I think I didn't understand clearly the intent. So I think it's a good card in very specific matchups. I would give it 2 stars, and it's a niche card. All right, now we have the Draven Vanquisher, 6 stars. And before hearing what I'm gonna say, I would give it a 5. I would not give it a 6. Even the red decks don't really play him in 3 copies, for example. And if that would be a 6 star, it would be played as a 3 of in most red decks, and it's not. But in the Draven deck, it's fantastic because you don't have to look for it. You have one of the best 2-drops in the entire game.
Our first 6 stars is gonna be Draven. This guy is nuts. Like, holy shit. 4 resources for 4 might, already on rate. Doesn't require you to play power.
That is an incredibly important aspect, because you're gonna be able to play him on turn 2. Essentially, think about it this way. Every Draven deck, until end of time, till this card rotates out, they basically always have a 4-drop, right, for your turn 2. Like, you always have it. You don't have to draw anything. You can make an entire Draven deck without any 4-cost units, because you're gonna have this one on curve.
Right, so it can be just dropped on turn 2 if you go first. And then after that, this guy is just unbelievable. When I win a combat, play a gold gear token exhausted. So it allows you to essentially build up your mana by just winning and gaining points, which is phenomenal.
And also remember that I did not know back then that winning a combat doesn't have to be done via winning an actual fight. It can be just by pushing out opponents. We did not know that back then, right? Not only me, everyone.
It also works on both attack and defense, right? So he just creates gold gear tokens all the time. It's worth defending him. And when I attack or defend, you may pay 1 power that you can use with the gold, right? If you do, give me +2 might this turn. It's incredible. 4 resources, 6 might, and you just pay power because it just fuels itself. Is phenomenal. This card is bonkers good. It is definitely meta defining because people will have to play around it. Void Seeker's looking very good against this guy, so they're probably gonna be even more often used in.
Well, that was definitely wrong. Void Seeker is completely out of the meta game.
Other red deck, and I feel like, yeah, this guy he's gonna be so expensive. If the print run is not much bigger than the first expansion, this guy is gonna be very expensive. Maybe not as expensive as, for example, the Watcher, but probably a little bit more expensive than currently Darius Trifar.
Okay, so I completely missed the mark over here, right? Because the thing is, Draven is basically in all the red decks that are not Draven. You're probably not even gonna play Draven because you just have better options like Kai'Sa and you don't have that many slots. You could play him as a replacement if you don't have Kai'Sas, for example, right? But in a Draven deck, I do agree, he is like meta defining because you will encounter him every time you play a Draven. You will most likely see a Draven vanquisher on turn 2 being played, so he is meta defining. So the 6 stars is understandable that I gave it. Now I would give it 5 stars because it's not as common as a 3-off in the decks. He's just a 1-off in Dravens, and in other red decks he probably is not even getting played, which is kind of unbelievable when you think about it. But yeah, still a very good card. Next card, Ferrus Forerunner. Let's see. I gave it 5 stars. Probably should have been the other way around. We'll see.
Death Knell. Play 2 free Might Max tokens to your base. Now, compare this to the gear that we just talked about. The gear was costing 4, and then you would have to use it 2 turns and also play more power. This guy just costs you 6 resources and 1 power, and then when it dies, it just gives you the next 6 might for free. Unbelievable level of might. Like, this guy is really good. It doesn't have to be played in any mech decks, but it obviously has a synergy there. So this is just a good card that you might consider in almost any red deck. Now, I don't feel like it deserves 6 stars because it doesn't have like a very powerful effect early in the game, or like in the late game also doesn't have an instant impact. It just delivers a lot of value, but it is very good. And yeah, that's it.
Okay, so very superficial evaluation of this card, I would say. I do agree with the 5 stars, probably not a 6 star. And I agree with the points about it being slow and not having an instant impact, but it's not the case of it's not the point of the card, right? It's about how hard it is to remove. I definitely should have talked more about the purple being a problem of this card. You know, it's like that is something that I should have mentioned in this evaluation. That is something that is keeping Ferrus Forerunner from being like a 3-off in every single red deck, right? Like the rebukes, the fight or flights, all of that is making it much slower. But I don't think that's even unfair to like maybe even question back then, because no, scratch what I said. Annie was already playing all of those cards, so I just didn't think about it. That's something that I definitely need to work on. It's still a 5-cost card, but I should be more explicit in explaining the potential dangers of like why using this card might be backfiring or something. But hey, we'll see.
Interesting.
Let's see what I said about Piercing Light.
2 mana, 1 power. Has an effect, deal 2 damage to a unit at a battlefield, then deal 2 damage to up to 1 other unit. That doesn't have to be on a battlefield. It has repeat, so you can essentially deal like 4 damage and 4 damage, right? So the obvious comparison would be Piercing Light is kind of like a worse Falling Star because the breakpoint is worse at a base level, because 2 damage, there's a big difference. But once you start thinking about it more, and I spoke with this about this card with Alan, he pointed out some really good setups that instantly changed my mind about this card, because I was like, yeah, why would I want to play this over Falling Star? But then it just makes sense. For example, on 9 resources, you can play a Watcher, then Piercing Light, right? You play without Accelerate, so the Watcher just gives -3 might to the entire board, and then Piercing Light is able to, for example, destroy 2 units, because it's gonna destroy something at a battlefield and something else for no deramping, because it will not cost you power, so you only paid for the Watcher, so you're at 8 instead of 7 if it would be the case with a falling star. So next turn you're gonna have be up to 10 and play, for example, a time warp.
This is valid idea, but it's not that important. The most important aspect of Piercing Light is the fact that when a Draven plays a 2-drop and then plays the Draven Vanquisher, you can Piercing Light both if the 2-drop is on the battlefield and kill both. And that is like game breaking, right? It's like tempo breaking against the Draven, and it's super duper worth.
So the setups are just much better with Piercing Light because of the deramping costing less. And even if you want to play for more damage, then you have that op. So flexibility here makes up for the lack of initial power on the floor. And I think because of that, the card is awesome. Now, will it be meta defining? I don't want to give it 6 stars, but I'm very close to. But the card is just very good. Very good because of the flexibility, very good because it also looks cool. But it just
does it look cool?
Feels like a good card.
Doesn't look cool.
Will fit so many battlefields.
Actually,
and you have
doesn't
the
look
option
cool.
of choosing so many different outcomes of it. So big fan of this card. I'm actually surprised that this is not like a signature spell for Lucian, because
That is actually a good point. Why is this not a signature spell for Lucian, right? I mean, we know that he has Relentless Pursuit. Maybe this was a signature spell for Lucian at some point. Who knows?
it would just fit. But yeah, it's gonna be an expensive card for sure as well.
Well, it's not expensive because, you know, not a single card in this expansion is expensive. At least in Europe. I don't know about you Americans, but overall I feel like my my impression of Piercing Light here is valid. I would still give it 5 stars. It's a very good card, and it's if you play a red deck, you probably will play Piercing Light right now in the metagame because Draven is so prevalent, right? Even the Dravens that you will see perform right now in top tournaments, they do have a Piercing Light in the main deck, and in the sideboard most likely a second copy or something, you know? So yeah, not a bad established evaluation of it. All right, I gave Rengar a 6 star. That's a little bit too much. Let's see what I said.
A second 6-star card, and it's not really hard to break down why. 3 resources, 1 power, 3 might on a base level.
Let's see actually if I mentioned Annie. Because Rengar, when it comes to red decks, he is the most powerful in any decks because you can then play Rengar on the defense, right? Think about it this way. Rengar doesn't have to be played as an attacker to get the assault. If you have 1 open resource, pass the turn as an Annie, get up to 3, suddenly you can play Rengar as a 3 might unit on the defense when you're being attacked into a battlefield.
It can be a reaction. It has assault too, and it can be played to a battlefield you're attacking. Whenever you attack, if you're playing red and whenever you attack and you have 3 mana open, your opponents have to think, oh my god, that's +5. That is crazy. That is just, that is so much might. It's just incredible. You're just bluffing so much potentially like game-breaking might addition from hand, and it's a unit. Remember, this guy going in probably will not die when you play him in many situations. So you're left with this guy still being there, and if it doesn't get removed easily when you attacked and conquered, then he goes back to base and then goes back to attack for 5. He is phenomenal. It's meta defining for sure.
Ooh.
Specific also because he's a reaction. Like, he's also reverse Shen, right? Shen, when you think about it, Shen is a fantastic card, but Shen is a reactionary card in a pure sense of it. Like, you're reacting to what your opponent is doing. Rengar here is a proactive card because it showcases like potential lethal damage while the opponent's attack. So I feel like Rengar, because of that, has way more flexibility and is just phenomenal card. So yeah, expect this gonna be like costing you a lot of cash as well if you're buying 6.
Okay, so I completely missed the mark over here, but I do still think that it's a very playable card. I do think there's an oversaturation of really playable red and purple cards, right? And Rengar was being used in very rare occasions in the metagame, but I think his time will still shine because it's still a very powerful card. 5 might for 3 resources, that is like really incredible amount. And the fact that you can use it on defense for just 3 might is also pretty good. I would give it a 5 star, but judging from the metagaming perspective, like, he is invisible for now. So no one, like, when you play against a red, you probably never assume that someone has a Rengar, right? Which also coincidentally and funnily enough makes him actually a better card right now, because cards like this are the best when your opponent doesn't anticipate that you can play it, right? So if you want to play Rengar, that's probably the best time to play it. It's right now. All right, so I gave a 2-star to Skyfall of Arian, and this is a card that is only playable in the Lucian combo deck for now. So let's see if I even thought about the Lucian combo. Probably not. Skyfall of Arian. I think Arian. I am not actually certain. On a thing. 3 resources. Equip for 1 resource and 1 power, so a little bit more. My hold effects are also concur effects and vice versa. +2. Very niche card. And let's just say from this set, from the same color, Dune. Okay. Breaker would be like a synergy when, for example, Breaker. When you concur, you draw 2 instead of just when you hold, draw 2. Obviously, that's very powerful. But how often you have creatures that have a hold effect or like a conquer effect, and how often you hold actually? If you have a conquer effect, how often you hold? If you have a hold effect, how often you concur with the units? So I think this is a very, very, very niche card. You're not gonna have a lot of cards that have an effect for that in the first place. So how would you justify playing this like 3 times in your deck to make sure this is worthwhile? Like Kai'Sa, for example, the unit would be drawing cards when she holds. Would you pay 4 resources and power for that effect, and also 2 might, of course, right, on that Kai'Sa? Is that worth it? It stays on the board, right? So the Skyfall can be reused on a different unit, but then does the effect have anything more than just might, because the other card also has an effect that conquers and hold? There's so many questions here, so it really depends on the build. There might be some potential in this card, but for now it's very, very, very niche. Okay, so I completely missed the possibility of comboing this with actual other pieces of equipment, and I was giga focused on understanding how much value this would bring to units that have a hold effect or a conquer effect, right? And doubling the effects of the cards of the units. But I didn't think about effects that are being brought to units by upgrades, right? So completely mismatched, even though evaluation is okay because 2 stars, it's a niche card, it's only playable in Lucian. But I did not think that it can become a win condition, which makes it a little bit better in that deck. So that's a lesson learned. So far, from making those evaluations, what I learned during those evaluations is that I have to focus on new legends, try to think about what kind of decks those new legends can even play. And then the second thing is to think a little bit more outside of the box. I feel like in many cases, that's the thing that it didn't allow me to like make the second step. Like with the Miracle deck, I knew that that archetype like that would be playable with some of the cards that I saw in the previews, but I just assumed that a deck like this will not exist yet, but I should actually make the second step in asking myself, wait, what if the deck like this can already exist, right? So that's something that I definitely need to learn from watching those reviews of the cards that I did in the very early Spiritforged review. Okay. Thank you for watching. Remember, all of my content is always free. You don't have to pay anything. Leaving a like, a comment, or a subscription to the channel is very appreciated if you would like to watch more in the future of this type of content as well. But if you would like to support this stream financially and the content financially, then you can do that. The best way would be through kick.com/LotharHS, when you can just sub for $5 and I'm getting $4.74 out of it, which is the best possible deal a content creator can have. So thank you for doing that. Bye bye.